My name is Fiona Monroe, and at 34, I learned the most dangerous person to my home wasn't anywhere overseas. I came back 2 days early. I wanted to surprise my mom with a quiet Sunday. Instead, I pushed open my own front door and found her alone at my kitchen table, crying so hard she couldn't hear me come in. My father was in my living room. He had my papers spread across the coffee table like he was doing my taxes, calm as a man reading the Sunday news. I didn't raise my voice. I just started reading. And what I read sent me to the county recorder's office the very next morning, because the signature my father had filed, I never could have signed. Welcome back to Hidden Family Revenge, where ordinary people discover what they're made of when the people closest to them cross a line, and where dignity always lands the last word. If a story ever made you sit up a little straighter, you're in the right place. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and be sure to subscribe so the next one finds you. Because what my father did next, in front of our whole family, is something he is still trying to explain. For a second I just stood in the doorway with my duffel still on my shoulder. My mother's name is Carol, and Carol Monroe does not cry where people can see. She had both hands flat on the table like she was holding it down. My father didn't even look up. "We're just getting your paperwork in order, sweetheart," he said, sliding one page under another. I set my bag down slow. I asked him what paperwork. He said the kind every family should keep together. There were 3 stacks on my coffee table. One was bank statements that weren't mine, one was a thick envelope from a title company in the next county, and one was a single page with a county stamp in the corner, the kind you only get when something has been recorded as official. I picked up that one first. I spent 12 years in the army learning that panic is a luxury, so I read instead. It was a deed, a quitclaim deed, transferring my house, the one I bought with my own savings and a VA loan, to a name I had never heard. And at the bottom, on the grantor line, was my signature. Except it wasn't. The loops were too friendly. I signed my name like I'm filling out a form under a tarp in the rain, because for most of my adult life, that's exactly where I signed things. This was somebody's idea of how a daughter should sign. My father finally looked at me then. He smiled the way he smiles at church. "You weren't here to handle it," he said, "so I handled it." My mother made a sound like she'd been holding her breath since February. I put the page down very gently because my hands wanted to do something else. I needed to know who had let him in. Let me back up because you should know who you're rooting for. I joined the army at 22 with one duffel and a chip on my shoulder. Logistics. I moved fuel, food, parts, and people across places most folks only see on the news. 12 years, 3 continents. I was good at it because I am the kind of person who reads the whole manual and then reads it again. 2 years ago, I did something I'd wanted my whole life. I bought a house. Not an inheritance. Not a gift. A small craftsman built in 1924, white with a green door, on Beach Street in the same little Ohio town where my grandmother lived until she passed. I used to sit on her porch as a kid and pretend the maple out front was mine. So I bought the house 4 doors down because the one I wanted wasn't for sale, and I told myself close enough was a kind of homecoming. Here's the part I'm not proud of. For most of my life, I kept the peace in my family by staying gone. I sent money. I missed birthdays and called it duty. I never asked anyone for anything, and I think that's the part that confused them later, because people who never ask are easy to take from quietly. My weakness was never that I trusted too much. It was that I handed things off. I let my little brother keep a spare key so somebody could check the pipes in winter. I told my mother where the important folder was, in case of an emergency. I treated my family like a unit that had my back. I should have known better the day I handed my brother that key. That first night, I didn't yell. I made coffee, because that's what you do when the room is too hot to think in. I sat across from my father at my own table and asked him plainly to explain the deed. He leaned back like a man who'd rehearsed. He told me the house needed someone on the ground. He told me I was never around to protect it. He told me he'd simply moved it into a family structure for safekeeping, the way responsible people do. Every sentence had the word family in it, and none of them had the word ask. I told him the signature on that deed was not mine. He waved his hand like I'd mentioned a typo. Details, he said. We can fix the details before the closing. I felt the word closing land in my chest like a dropped wrench. What closing? He didn't answer that. He said something I have heard in different shapes my entire life, the line he used to explain every empty chair at every dinner I missed because of him. A soldier doesn't need roots, Fiona. He said it gently, almost kind. That was the worst part. My mother whispered, Ray, please, not tonight. He patted her hand and stood and gathered his stacks like a man closing a briefcase. He left the recorded deed behind, maybe on purpose, maybe because he believed it was already his to leave. I walked him to the door and watched his truck back out of my driveway and turned toward the county road that leads to their place, 25 minutes east. Then I stood in my living room a long time. My mother was still at the table. There was a closing I'd never agreed to, somewhere out there with a date on it. And I had until that date to find out everything. My brother showed up the next morning before I'd even finished the coffee. Cody is 30, 4 years younger, and he has a way of arriving anywhere like he just happened to be passing. He let himself in through the side door. He still had a key, of course. Hey, Fee, he said, too bright. You're back early. I asked him if he knew about the deed. He found the window very interesting. I've been watching the place for you, he said. Like you asked. I had asked him to check the pipes in January. I had not asked him to bring our father in to photograph my files. He told me not to make it a whole thing. He said Dad was just tired, just stressed, just trying to keep everybody afloat. Every excuse was a life raft for somebody who wasn't drowning yet. My mother sat where she'd sat the night before. She finally spoke, and all she could get out was, "You came back." Then her voice broke clean in half. I realized she wasn't scared of me. She was scared for me, and she had been scared for a while, and nobody had told me because I was 5,000 miles away with a phone that only worked when the network felt like it. I walked Cody out. On the way, I noticed the side door lock. It wasn't scratched, wasn't forced. It just opened for the right key. I asked him, quiet, how many people had a key to my house? He said, just me. He said it too fast. I let him drive off. Then I went back inside and started writing down everything I could remember, dates and names, the way you log an incident before the details blur. Something about that envelope from the title company would not leave me alone. You have to understand what that house was to me, or none of this will hit the way it hit me. When I was 8, my grandmother let me paint the porch railing on Beach Street a color called Robin's Egg, and she didn't fix the drips. She said the drips were proof a kid was happy here. I slept in that house every summer. My father's temper made our own house too loud. It was the one address that never moved while everything else in my life did. When my grandmother died, the house sold to strangers before I could even get leave to come home. So I bought the next best thing 4 doors down, and I painted that railing the same blue, and I left the drips. To my father, a house is a number. It's a line on a balance sheet, an asset, something you leverage when the other numbers go red. To me, it was the first door I ever owned a key to. I want you to sit with that difference, because that difference is the whole story. He looked at my home and saw a way out. I looked at it and saw a way to finally stay. The morning after Cody left, I went to sort the mail I'd had held for the deployment, and the forwarding mess waiting for me made a sick kind of sense. Before I shipped out, I'd given Cody a key to look in on the house. Cody, I'd find out, had handed that key to our father. Somewhere in those months, someone had filed a change of address in my name that I never authorized, peeling my mail off to a box I'd never rented. So the envelopes that mattered never reached Beach Street at all. Most of it I'd untangle later, but one piece had slipped through the cracks of their own scheme and come home anyway. Under a pile of grocery flyers was a thin envelope from the county, a recorded document notice, my name on it, a date stamped on it that I knew, the way you know your own birthday, was a date I'd spent in another country entirely. I sat down on my own front steps. I did not cry. I started counting backward. That notice was the moment this stopped being a family argument. The county had recorded a deed against my property 5 months earlier, in May. I pulled up my deployment calendar on my phone. In May, I was at Grafenwöhr, in Germany, running a supply rotation that did not include a single day stateside. I had not flown home. I had not signed anything. I had not stood in front of any notary in Ohio, because I had been standing in the rain at a motor pool in Bavaria. I called my mother. She picked up, heard my voice, and hung up. And I understood that wasn't rejection, it was terror. I called Cody. Straight to voicemail. So I stopped calling. I have learned that when a situation goes sideways, the worst thing you can do is keep poking at the people who already failed you. The best thing you can do is gather your own facts. I stopped treating this like a family fight. I started treating it like a mission. I made a list. The way I'd plan a convoy. Get the official record. Confirm the dates. Find out who notarized a signature I never gave. Find out what closing my father kept mentioning, and stop it before it happened. I didn't know yet how deep it went. I didn't know about the company with my house inside it, or about the old friend with a notary stamp, or about the wall of debt my father had built and then tried to hide behind my front door. But I knew the first stop. County Recorder's office opened at 8. I set my alarm for 6. Whatever my father had filed, the county had a copy, and the county doesn't take sides. The county recorder's office smelled like old paper and burnt coffee, and I have never loved a place more. There was a woman at the counter named Patrice, who'd clearly seen everything twice. I asked for a certified copy of the full ownership history on my parcel. She typed my address, raised an eyebrow at her screen, and printed without a word. The stack came out warm. On top was my own deed from 2 years ago, clean, my real signature on it, the day I became a homeowner. Under it was something new. A quitclaim deed, recorded in May, transferring the property from Fiona Monroe to an entity called Keystone Family Holdings, LLC, for the sum of, and I read this part twice, $10 and other valuable consideration. $10 for my house. I had bought that house with 31 years of careful living and a loan I earned by serving my country, and someone had given it away for the price of 2 coffees. Patrice watched my face. "Honey," she said quietly, "you want me to flag anything?" I told her not yet. I needed to understand it first. I asked her one question. If a deed gets recorded, does the office check that the signature is real? She shook her head. "We record what's brought to us," she said. "Spotting a forgery is on you and the courts." I folded the certified copies into my jacket like they were ammunition, because in a way they were. Walking to my truck, I felt the strangest calm settle over me. My father had built his whole plan on me never being here to look. He forgot one thing about the Army. The Army writes everything down, and so do I. If you're still with me, do me one favor when this video ends. Look up your own property on your county recorder's website. It takes 5 minutes, and most people never do it once. I used to think this kind of thing only happened to strangers in the news. It was sitting on my own coffee table. Subscribe if you want to see how I took it apart, page by page, and made the man who filed it wish he'd never learned my address. I read that forged deed at my kitchen table with a ruler because I wanted to be fair, and because I wanted to be sure before I burned my whole family down to the studs. The signature was wrong in a way only I would catch. My capital F leans hard right, like it's bracing for wind. This one stood up straight and polite. The date of notarization was May 14th. I'd been overseas since February. And then there was the entity. Keystone Family Holdings, LLC. I had never heard the name in my life. I write down everything, remember, and I had no note, no email, no call about any holding company. Whoever signed my name had clearly never watched me sign anything. The loops were too friendly. The pressure was too even. It was the signature of a person who had time and a flat surface, and no fear of a sergeant standing over them. I set my real signature beside it, from my actual deed, and the difference was so obvious I almost laughed. Almost. Because under the polite fake signature was a notary block, and a stamp, and a printed name I recognized like a smell from childhood. The notary who swore my signature was genuine, who certified under oath that I had appeared before them in person on May 14th, was a man my father had known for 30 years, a man I'd seen at every cookout and every funeral, a man whose stamp meant he had legally promised the county that I was standing in front of him on a day I was on another continent. I sat back in my chair. The whole thing had just changed shape. This wasn't one desperate man with my mail. This was at least two men with a plan, and one of them had a license he was about to learn the weight of. Dale Pruitt. That was the name on the stamp. Dale ran the front counter at a title and insurance shop 2 towns over, and he'd been my father's fishing buddy since before I was born. I remembered him slipping me $5 at my high school graduation and telling me the Army would make a man out of me, which was a strange thing to tell a girl. But that was Dale. Now Dale had put his commission on the line for my father, and I doubted he understood how thin that line was. Here's something most people don't know. A notary doesn't just stamp a paper. In every state, the whole point of that stamp is a sworn promise that the signer stood in front of them, in person, and that the notary checked an ID. Plenty of notaries, including here in Ohio, also keep a journal, a record of each signing with the date and the document. Either way, the truth was going to surface. If Dale kept a journal, it was evidence. If he didn't, the gap where my signing should have been was evidence too. I looked up Dale's commission on the Secretary of State's public site. Active. Commission number right there, expiration date, the works. Then I called his shop, casual as a woman confirming an appointment. I asked the receptionist whether Mr. Pruitt did signings at the office on the 14th of May because I thought I'd dropped something there. She checked. "Oh no," she said, helpful as anything. Dale worked from home that whole week. His back. I thanked her and hung up and sat very still. If Dale was home on the 14th, then he didn't meet anyone at the office. And if he never met me, it would show, one way or another. No entry was a problem for him. A faked entry was a bigger one. Either way, the weakest link in my father's chain had just lit up like a flare. I drove the 25 minutes east to my parents' place on a Tuesday morning because I knew my father took his truck to the auction lot on Tuesdays, and I needed my mother alone. She opened the door before I knocked. She looked like she hadn't slept since the day I came home. I didn't lead with the deed. I led with a cup of tea, 2 sugars, the way she likes it, and I waited. It came out of her in pieces. The construction business had collapsed 18 months ago, a big job gone bad, a lawsuit, suppliers he couldn't pay. They'd taken a second mortgage on their own house and now owed more than it was worth. My father, she said, had stopped sleeping, started pacing, started saying things like, "We're going to lose everything." And then he'd started talking about my house. He said it was the only thing standing between this family and the street, she told me. He said you'd understand. He said you didn't even live there. She'd argued. She'd told him it was wrong, that it was mine, that you don't do this to your own daughter. He'd told her to stay out of the men's side of it. She looked at me with her hands shaking around the mug, and she said the thing I will hear for the rest of my life. "I didn't know how to call you, baby. I didn't know what to say after." I held her hand. I told her it wasn't her fault, and I meant it. And I also understood in that moment that she was going to be the one who could end this, because a mother's word in a room full of family carries a weight no document can match. But I didn't ask her to fight yet. She'd been alone in this too long. I just needed one thing before I left, and she went to get it without me asking. She came back with an old cookie tin, the kind with a faded Christmas scene on the lid that every family seems to own. Inside was a folded copy of my original deed, the real one, which she'd quietly kept a duplicate of since the day I closed on the house, in case the important folder ever burned. That made me love her so much my throat hurt. Under the deed was a letter. My grandmother's handwriting, looping and certain, written years ago to my mother. It talked about Beach Street, about putting down roots in a town where people knew your name, about how she hoped one of us would stay long enough to belong somewhere. It wasn't a will. It didn't give me anything. It couldn't transfer a brick. But it told the truth about what that street meant to the women in my family, and someday, in a room full of people, the truth about what a thing means matters almost as much as who owns it. I want to be clear about something because I've seen these stories go wrong. Nobody handed me a secret weapon. My grandmother didn't pre-sign my house over to me from beyond the grave. My mother didn't have a magic document that fixed everything. All she gave me was a clean copy of my own deed and her willingness, when the time came, to stand up and say what she'd seen. Everything else, I was going to have to earn the hard way, with records and dates and law. I put the tin under my arm. My mother walked me to the door. "He did it while you were over there," she whispered, like a confession. "You were on the other side of the ocean." I told her that was exactly the point. That night, I cleared my kitchen table and laid out 3 pieces of paper in a row, and I want you to picture them, because these 3 pages are the spine of everything that comes next. On the left, the forged quitclaim deed, notarized May 14th, swearing that Fiona Monroe appeared in person before Dale Pruitt and signed away her home. In the middle, my official deployment orders, printed on the kind of paper the Army doesn't joke around with, stating in plain government language that I was assigned to Grafenwöhr, Germany, from February through October. And on the right, the boring proof that wins cases, my travel records and the entry stamp in my passport, showing the last time I'd set foot on American soil was months before that May date, and I didn't come back until fall. 3 pages. One impossible day. A person cannot stand in front of a notary in Ohio while she is pulling a 12-hour shift at a motor pool 5,000 miles away. It is not a matter of he said, she said. It is not a matter of feelings or family loyalty or who loves whom. It is a matter of geography, and geography does not care that he's my father. I sat there and looked at those 3 pages for a long time. My whole life my father had used my absence against me. Every empty seat, every missed holiday, every "you weren't here" had been a small withdrawal from an account he assumed would never be audited. And the cruelest, smartest part of his plan was built on that same assumption. She's never here, so she'll never check. He built the whole thing on me being gone. He forgot that the United States Army keeps meticulous track of exactly where its soldiers are, and that I am a logistics officer, which means I am, professionally, a person who can prove where anything was on any given day. I took a photo of the 3 pages together. Then I started making calls. My first call was to base legal assistance, because one thing the Army gives you, free, is lawyers, and a soldier who's just been forged out of her home qualifies for help. The legal assistance attorney listened, asked 3 sharp questions, and referred me to a civilian real estate attorney who handled title fraud. Her name was Renata, and she talked fast and clean, no padding. She told me a forged deed is void, not just voidable, meaning if the signature is fake, the transfer is legally nothing from the start. She told me the path. File an affidavit of forgery, report it to the county's fraud unit, file a complaint with the office that licenses notaries, and, she said, let's find out who's really behind Keystone Family Holdings, because somebody had to create that LLC, and that paper trail has a name on it. I'd been so focused on the deed I hadn't chased the company, so I did. The Secretary of State's business registry is public, free, and open at midnight, which is when I was awake anyway. I searched Keystone Family Holdings, LLC. It had been formed 7 months ago. It listed a registered agent and an address, and the address was a P.O. box at a strip mall mailbox store, and that box explained the silence. Every notice the county generated for the new deed, every letter the title company sent about the refinance, had gone there, not to me, because on all their paperwork the owner of my house was now a company that picked up its mail in a strip mall. As far as the system knew, the right party had been getting the mail all along, but the organizer, the person who filed the paperwork to create the company, the person whose name sat right there in black and white as the human being who breathed this shell into existence, was Raymond Monroe. My father. He hadn't sold my house to a stranger. He'd built a fake company to be the stranger, and then forged my name to sign my house over to that company. A company that was really just him with a different name on the mailbox. I read it 3 times. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a family using one of those clumsy structures. It was a plan, with steps, in his own filing. Once I had the company, the rest of it opened up like a drawer that had been stuck. Public court records told the story my mother had only half told. There were 3 judgments against my father's old business, totaling a number with a comma in a place that makes you wince. There was a lien filed by a lumber supplier he still owed. There was a notice connected to the second mortgage on my parents' house, the one that was underwater. And then I found the part that turned my stomach, because it told me how close I'd come to losing everything without ever knowing. The title company in the next county, the one whose envelope had been on my coffee table, had opened a file to refinance my house, to pull cash out of it. My house, my equity, my name, routed into a loan that would have buried my home under my father's debt. And the only reason it hadn't closed yet was that the title company, doing its job, had flagged a problem with the paperwork and paused everything pending additional verification. I want you to hear that clearly, because it matters for how you think about me. I didn't get lucky because I'm clever. I got lucky because a clerk somewhere followed a checklist, the same way a clerk at the county handed me the records, the same way the army wrote down where I was. Process saved my house in the gap before I got home. My father wasn't saving this family. He was using me as collateral, quietly, while I served overseas, betting that by the time I noticed, it would be done. He'd planned to close it as a voluntary transfer once I was back, to paper over the forgery. He just hadn't expected me to come home 2 days early. My father found out I was digging, the way men like him always do, through the family grapevine. Within a week, the messages started. He created a group text with half the family on it, aunts and uncles and a cousin or 2, and he wrote like a wounded patriarch. "Real families don't sue each other," he posted. "I only ever tried to protect what we built." He never built my house. I built my house. But the messages did their work. My aunt called me, gentle and disappointed, asking if I really wanted to put my own father through this over a misunderstanding. A cousin texted that I'd always been hard. My father knew exactly what he was doing. He couldn't win on the law, so he was trying to win on shame, in public, where I'd been raised to keep quiet and keep the peace. He called me once, and I let it go to voicemail, and he left a message that ended with the line he'd been using on me since I was a girl, the one that explained away every door he'd ever closed in my face. "You weren't here," he said. "You're never here." Then he proposed what he called a family meeting, a chance to sit down, calm, no lawyers, and settle this among ourselves. He wanted me to come to their house and sign a fresh deed, a voluntary one this time, to erase the forged one and make the whole thing look like a daughter helping her struggling parents. He thought a room full of relatives would do the pressuring for him. I thought about it for 1 full day. Then I texted back that I'd be glad to host the family meeting myself, at my house, on Beach Street. If my father wanted my living room one more time, he could have it, one last time, on my terms. I spent the next week building my case the way I'd build a load plan for a convoy, because that's the only way I know how to handle something that could blow up. Renata called it an evidence package. I called it an inventory. I made copies of everything and put them in a single folder in order so that anyone could follow the story without me saying a word. The real deed, with my real signature. The forged quitclaim deed, with the polite fake one. My deployment orders and passport stamp, proving the impossible date. Dale Pruitt's notary commission, printed from the state site. The LLC filing with my father's name as organizer. The court records of his judgments and liens. And the title company's refinance file, with its paused flagged status. I didn't pack for a fight, I packed for an inspection. While I worked, Renata moved on the formal side. We filed the affidavit of forgery. We reported the recorded deed to the county fraud unit, which confirmed they'd open a review, and Renata filed a quiet title action in court, because the county couldn't just erase a recorded deed on its own. Only a judge could declare the forgery void and order the record fixed. We submitted a complaint to the state office that oversees notaries, which meant Dale Pruitt was about to receive a letter requesting his official journal for May. Everything was filed, real, and in motion. Not a threat. A done thing. The only loose piece, Renata said, was testimony. Documents prove the what, people prove the how. And there were two people who knew exactly how my father had done it, and how they'd helped him. One of them was my brother. The other was the man whose stamp made the whole thing look legal. I decided to talk to my brother first, because I still loved him, and because I wanted to give him the chance to choose right before everyone was watching. I asked Cody to meet me at the diner on Route 9, neutral ground, pancakes, no audience. He came in already nervous, jiggling his knee under the table. I didn't ambush him. I slid the folder across, open to the LLC filing with Dad's name on it, and I let him read until his face changed. Then I asked him, quiet, how my father got into my house, and how he got my files, and whether Cody had been the one to let him in. He didn't lie. I'll give him that much. He put his face in his hands and the whole thing fell out of him. He owed money, a lot of it, the kind you owe to people who don't send polite letters. Gambling, mostly. Online. The stuff that eats a man at 2 a.m. Dad had found out and promised to make it all go away once the house thing closed. All Cody had to do was give Dad the spare key, let him in twice, and photograph my important folder. He told me it was just a refinance fee, Cody said. He told me you'd thank us later. I looked at my little brother, the kid I used to carry on my shoulders, and for 1 second I felt sorry for him so deep it scared me. He was drowning, and our father had handed him an anchor and called it a rope. That's the closest thing to sympathy anyone in this story is going to get from me. Because feeling sorry for him didn't change what came next. I told him the truth. The deed was forged, which is a crime, and the county and the state were already involved, and when they asked him questions, he was going to tell them exactly what he told me. I'm not angry that you were weak, Cody, I said. I'm done being the only one in this family who isn't. He nodded. He was going to testify, and he was going to face whatever came with that. Dale Pruitt was harder, because Dale had a license to protect, and 30 years of loyalty to my father pulling him the other way. I went to his shop on a slow afternoon. I didn't bring a lawyer or a raised voice. I bought a bottle of water from the cooler and sat down across from his desk like an old family friend, which, technically, I still was. I told him I knew about the deed. I watched the color leave his face one shade at a time. Then I said the only thing I needed to say. The state's going to ask for your journal for May, Dale. What's it going to show? He started to talk and stopped. He tried. Your dad said you authorized it over the phone. There it was. With one sentence, Dale Pruitt admitted he had never met me, never watched me sign, never verified my ID in person, which is the entire job of a notary, the only thing the stamp is supposed to mean. A phone call is not a signing. There is no version of the rules where a man at home with a bad back notarizes a signature for a woman in Germany he never spoke to. I didn't gloat. I almost felt bad for him, the way you feel bad watching someone realize the ladder they climbed has no bottom rungs left. I'm not your enemy here, I told him, but I'm not going to lie for anyone, and you shouldn't either, because the journal is going to talk whether you do or not. A notary who certifies a signing that never happened has only one thing left to lose, and it's the very stamp that makes him worth lying for. I left him sitting there with his water unopened. I didn't know yet which way he'd jump at the family meeting, but I knew he'd be there because my father had invited him to help apply the pressure, and I was counting on it. Renata told me I didn't have to do it this way. We could let the court void the deed quietly, let the notary board handle Dale, let the courts grind my father down without a single dramatic dinner. It was the safer play, she said, and she wasn't wrong. I thought about it hard, because I'm not a person who chases scenes, but I kept coming back to two things. The first was my mother. She had been alone in this for months. blamed for not stopping a man no one in that family had ever stopped. She needed to watch the truth get said out loud, in front of the same people who'd been texting me about loyalty, so she'd never again wonder whether she'd imagined it. The second was simpler. My father had used my own living room to start this, sitting at my coffee table like he already owned it. I wanted it to end in the same room, on the same furniture, with the same family watching, so there could be no story later about how I'd ambushed him in a courtroom or twisted things with lawyers. Some doors you close in the room where they were opened. So I planned the meeting like an operation. I knew who'd come. My father, of course, and probably Sherry, the girlfriend who'd been whispering about getting things settled. My mother, Cody, the aunt and uncle who'd been loudest in the group text. And Dale, brought to lend an air of official calm. I set out chairs. I made too much coffee, because that's who I am. And on the coffee table, the same one, I placed a single closed folder, face down, and a pen beside it. Let him think the pen was for me. Let him bring his fresh deed and his speech. I had pages of my own. The morning of the meeting, I cleaned my house the way you clean for an inspection, not a party. Everything squared away, the blue railing my grandmother would have recognized, the maple out front turning gold because it was October now, the same October my deployment orders said I'd been away through. My mother arrived first, 20 minutes early, in her good cardigan, hands trembling around her purse strap. I sat her at the kitchen table where she could see the living room. You don't have to say a word you don't want to, I told her. But if you tell the truth, it ends today. She nodded and didn't let go of the purse. Then the cars started. My father came in like a man arriving at his own celebration, Sherry on his arm in heels too tall for a gravel driveway. He carried a leather folder of his own and set it on my coffee table next to mine, and I watched him notice my folder, face down, and decide it was nothing. My aunt and uncle filed in with the careful faces of people who'd been told a sad story about an ungrateful daughter. Cody came last, pale, and took a chair by the door like he might need it, and Dale Pruitt arrived right on time, in a sport coat, looking like a man who'd thrown up before leaving the house. My father opened his folder. He took out a crisp new deed, printed and ready, and a second pen, and he slid them across my coffee table toward me with a warm and terrible smile. Let's keep this civil, he said, and keep it in the family. Sign here, sweetheart, and we put all this behind us. The room went quiet. Everyone looked at me. I reached out, and I turned my own folder over. I didn't pick up his pen. I left it lying on his fresh deed like a dropped tool. My father started his speech, the one he'd clearly rehearsed in the truck, all about a struggling family and hard times, and a daughter who could fix everything with one signature if she only loved them enough. He spread his hands to the room. He talked about sacrifice, about how he'd worked his whole life, about how the house was really the family's anyway. And then he said it. The line. The one that had explained away every empty chair at every table I'd ever missed. He said it to the whole room. Gentle, like wisdom. A soldier doesn't need roots, Fiona. A couple of heads nodded. My aunt looked at me with pity. My mother looked at her own hands. Cody stared at the floor by the door. And I felt something settle in me, calm and cold and clear, the feeling I used to get right before a long convoy when everything was finally loaded and checked. I didn't raise my voice. I have found that the quieter you get, the louder the room becomes. Before I sign anything, I said, let's make sure the last signature was real. My father blinked. Sherry's smile flickered. I opened my folder, and I didn't pull everything out at once, because an inspection isn't a dump, it's an order of operations. I took out the top page and set it in the center of the coffee table, facing the room, not me, so everyone could read it. It was the forged quitclaim deed. This was recorded in May, I said. It transfers my house to a company. It has my signature on it. I let that sit for one breath, except I never signed it. And I can prove it. So before anyone talks about me being ungrateful, let's all look at what's actually been done in this family's name. I laid the pages down one at a time, slow, like dealing a hand nobody could fold out of. Next to the forged deed, I placed my deployment orders. On May 14th, the day this says, I stood in Ohio and signed. I said, I was in Grafenwohr, Germany. These are my orders. This is my passport stamp. I did not enter the United States again until October. The room got very still. I set down the next page. This deed was notarized by Dale Pruitt, who swore under his commission that I appeared in front of him. I looked at Dale, not unkindly. Dale, did you watch me sign this? Every face turned to him. He opened his mouth, and what came out was small and final. No, he said. I didn't. Ray told me you'd okayed it over the phone. A sound went through my aunt like air leaving a tire. I kept going, calm, one page at a time. I set down the LLC filing. The company my house was given to, Keystone Family Holdings, was created by the person whose name is right here as organizer. I tapped it once. Dad, you made the company. You forged my name. You signed my house over to a shell you built in control for $10. And then my father did exactly what I knew he'd do, because men who rule by pressure have only one move when the pressure reverses. He exploded. He came up out of his chair so fast it tipped, his face going red, his voice filling my small living room until the windows felt thin. He called me ungrateful. He called me a liar in front of his own evidence. He told me I'd never been part of this family, that I'd run off and left them, that, you weren't here, you're never here. I let him finish. Then I said, quiet enough that everyone had to lean in to hear it, no, Dad, I wasn't here, and I can prove it down to the day. That's the whole problem with your signature. His mouth kept moving, but nothing came out. I picked up his fresh deed, the one with the pen, and I set it gently back in front of him. You always told me a soldier doesn't need roots, I said. Turns out a soldier just keeps the receipts. I didn't gloat, and I didn't threaten, because the most powerful thing in that room wasn't anger, it was the fact that everything was already done. I told them plainly what was no longer up for discussion. This isn't me deciding whether to make trouble, I said. I already filed. The affidavit of forgery is in. The county fraud unit is reviewing the deed. My lawyer has already filed in court to have a judge declare it void, and a forged deed is void from the start, which means it never legally moved anything. The state has requested Dale's notary journal for May. I looked around the room at the faces that had come to pressure me, and I watched them rearrange. You can call it family, I said. The county calls it forgery. Only one of those holds up on paper. My aunt set down her coffee cup like it had gone cold in her hands. Sherry, who had not said one word, stood up quietly, gathered her purse and walked out to wait in the truck. And I knew right then she'd be gone from his life within the month, because people like Sherry can smell a sinking boat. Dale stood next, his face gray. I'm sorry, Fiona, he said. I should never have. I'm sorry. Then he left too, to go do whatever a man does the night before he loses the stamp he built a small life on. Cody stayed in his chair by the door, crying without sound, and I let him, because some lessons have to be sat with. And my mother who had been alone in this for months, who had cried at my kitchen table because she didn't know how to call me, finally lifted her head. She looked straight at my father across the wreckage of his own plan, and for the first time in maybe 40 years, she did not look away first. My father sat in his tipped-back chair in my living room, surrounded by his own paperwork, and said nothing at all. There was nothing left to say. The room had read it for itself. Here's how it landed, because you deserve to know it didn't just feel good, it counted. Within a couple of months, a judge declared the forged quitclaim deed void, and once Renata carried that order back to the county recorder, the record was corrected. My name restored as it had always legally been, the fake company's claim erased like a smudge wiped off a window. The title company killed the refinance the moment Renata sent them the forgery affidavit, so my equity stayed mine and my home stayed unburdened. Dale Pruitt lost his notary commission, surrendered it before they could pull it, and is facing charges for false certification and his part in the forgery. which is what happens when you swear someone stood in front of you who is on another continent. My father is dealing with the rest. A civil claim from me that he can't talk his way out of, a criminal investigation into the forgery he organized in his own name, and the same wall of debt that started all of it. Still standing, no daughter's house to hide behind anymore. He never made it out of the bankruptcy he was trying to dodge. Cody told the truth to the investigators. Every bit of it, which cost him something and saved him something at the same time. He and I are not close, but he calls on holidays now, and he's paying down what he owes the honest way, and once in a while that's the most you can ask of a person who let you down. And my mother packed 2 suitcases and moved into my spare room on Beach Street while she figures out the rest of her life. And the first night she slept under my roof, I finally unpacked the last box from my move, the one I'd been living out of for 2 years because some part of me never believed I got to stay. We hung my grandmother's photo in the hallway. I planted a young maple in the front yard, a skinny little thing that won't throw real shade for 10 years, which is fine, because I plan to be here to see it. My mother sits on the porch in the mornings now with her tea, 2 sugars, and sometimes she runs her thumb along the drips in the blue railing and doesn't say anything, and she doesn't have to. People ask me if I feel bad, taking my own father down. I tell them the truth. He didn't fall because I pushed him. He fell because he built his whole plan on a lie, that I would never be here to check. And the one thing a person should never bet against is a logistics officer's records. I didn't beat him with anger. I never had to raise my voice past the volume of ordinary conversation. I beat him with paper, with dates, with the plain, unglamorous habit of writing things down and keeping them. The same habit that bored my family at every dinner I ever bothered to attend. He thought my absence made me weak. My absence is exactly what saved me, because I could prove, down to the day, that I was somewhere else entirely, doing my job, while he sat in my living room signing my name and calling it love. Family isn't a signature you owe anyone, it's the people who would never need to forge yours. That's my story. 1 forged page, 1 impossible date, and a living room that finally feels like mine. If this reminded you to pull your own property records, or to think twice about who holds a key to your home, take that as your sign, and do it today. If someone you love needs to hear this, share it with them. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.